Hi, thank you for joining us for a presentation from myself, Nicole Seltzer, and David Groves on visualizing community input for Yampa River planning. Before we get started, I wanted to just give you guys a quick overview about River Network. Many of you maybe have not heard of us. We are a national nonprofit organization that's based in Colorado. I worked for River Network for about the last 5 years. I live right outside of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is northwestern part of the state. And I handle a lot of our programs and coalition building in the Colorado River Basin area. And joining me today is my colleague, David Groves. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is David Groves. I'm a senior policy researcher with the RAND Corporation, which is also a nonprofit interested in informing public policy. For this effort, I'm working directly with the River Network, and I was brought on to help think about how to visualize stakeholder data related to water resources in the Yampa River.
Awesome. Okay, next slide, David. So I'm going to give you, for those of you who aren't familiar with the geography of the Yampa River Basin, just a really quick overview of where we are and sort of the good and bad characteristics of the river. As I mentioned, it is up in the northwest corner of Colorado. It encompasses 2 counties, Routt and Moffat County in northwestern Colorado. And the river is pretty unique within the state of Colorado. It encompasses about 15% of the water that leaves the state and helps satisfy water needs in the Green River Basin for endangered fish flows, as well as a good portion of our water for the Colorado River Compact. The river basin has very limited reservoirs. We only have one large main stem reservoir, and it's actually not that large. It's around 25,000 acre feet. And so because of that, we have a very natural hydrograph. We are a snowmelt dominated system with water coming out of the Continental Divide and the Flat Top Mountains. And so we have big high peak flows, and we have very low base flows like in a naturally derived system. In snowy years and big water, big runoff years, the floodplain still does connect to areas of intact riparian habitat. And we're really dominated by agriculture and ranching landscapes up here. Some of it is irrigated, some of it is dry land. And so we do have a lot of open space, cattle grazing, and not a whole lot of urban infrastructure. We've got generally just the towns of Steamboat Springs, Hayden, and Craig. In the lower part of the river, as well as in the Green River, there are endangered fish populations that require Fish and Wildlife Service management. And the basin also attracts a lot of visitors for both whitewater boating. There is a stellar multi-day river trip through Dinosaur National Monument, as well as a lot of cold and warm water fishing. In terms of the stressors on the system, there's a lot of pressure because we do have nice high flows still, and we contribute a lot of water that leaves the state. There's a lot of pressure to develop the water in the basin, both for in-basin use, and there have been attempts in the past to look at some exports out of the basin. We are a mountain resort community in the headwaters area, and so we have very high riverside land costs. Lots can cost upwards of $1 million. And because of that, it's leading to a lot of fragmentation, and we have a lot of absentee owners in the basin as well. A lot of the ranches that we have in this area are 4th and 5th generation family ranches, and they haven't really touched their irrigation infrastructure in over 100 years. And so we have a lot of old, aging, inefficient infrastructure. And then we're also seeing some climate change induced flow reductions. We've seen reductions in some places of 5 and 6% per decade of base flows over the last 50 years or so. And so what we're concerned about up here really is death by 1,000 cuts. It's not any one big challenge. It's kind of everything all combined. So David, next slide. In order to address some of this, about 3 years ago, I came to our local Basin Roundtable, which is kind of a water policy and granting organization, and I suggested to them that we do a basin-wide integrated water management plan. And the goal of the plan is to combine community input with science and engineering assessments so that we can identify actions that will protect existing and future water uses and support healthy river ecosystems as we're looking at growing populations, changing land uses, and climate uncertainty. The tasks for that project include doing a lot of stakeholder interviews and outreach. We did an assessment of the diversion infrastructure in the basin to understand its functionality and fish barriers and things like that. We're in the process of doing a remote environmental assessment where we're taking satellite data and aerial photography, and we're looking at things like channel complexity, riverside land use, floodplain connectivity. And then as we are analyzing all of that, we're looking at where we want to create focus areas and strategies, collect more data, and develop some action plans. So we are right in the middle of all of this work right now. Some of the possible outcomes for the process are perhaps developing a regional project to upgrade irrigation infrastructure, doing riparian corridor restoration and protection throughout the basin, looking at some flow protection measures, and then developing more recreation access to support economic development and diversification for our communities. Next slide, David. So in terms of the stakeholder involvement, which is what we wanted to talk about today, we spent about a year interviewing 150 agricultural, municipal, and environmental and recreational stakeholders to identify actions that they believe would best meet our future water needs, community recreation desires, and ensure a healthy river. We spent about 12 months. We had 2 half-time people that did the outreach coordination for us. We involved 3 nonprofit organizations. Each of those nonprofits was responsible for interviewing different sets of stakeholders. So we had different sets of questions. We had slightly different methods for how we collected that information. We had hundreds of pages of interview notes from one-on-one meetings with irrigators. And we collected information from them on a variety of topics, including what their big concerns are, what the perceived trends are, where the restoration opportunities are, how their irrigation operations were working, what their infrastructure needs were, and big picture policy ideas. So we finished all of that, and I sat in front of my computer in a little bit of a panic because I wasn't sure what to do next. And a mutual colleague introduced me to David, who said, I know exactly what you should do. And so we wanted to share our approach with you guys so that maybe you can learn from what we did and maybe avoid some of the mistakes.
Thanks a lot, Nicole. So I guess my task was really to help Nicole and all the stakeholders understand and gain insight from all of this input that was gathered through countless interviews and the volumes of written notes. So just to highlight a couple aspects of this challenge. So we had 3 different stakeholder groups from agriculture, environmental recreation, and municipal and industrial. And we had information that was not standardized. It was a combination of detailed interview notes, which included narratives, some categorical data, some numerical data, and all in all, there were around 100 questions or sub-questions that we were interested in trying to make sense of and convey key messages from. And this information was collected via Google Forms. So what that meant is that it was essentially in the format of Excel spreadsheets. So what we did was developed an approach to take this data and figure out how to handle it and use it to develop a narrative that was combined with interactive visualizations to tell the main outcomes of the analysis. So we first standardized the data, we mapped it where it was relevant, we summarized by user and region, and provide drill down detail, and provided this all in a format that I'll show you. So to prepare the data, this was actually one of the biggest challenges for us. So there was a number of steps we had to take. We had to do general cleanup, so making sure the locations were in the right place, correct, just general data issues like, that occur when you're collecting data from lots of different interviewers and interviewees, et cetera. And then one of the challenges was, how do we handle the narrative responses? So there's a lot of richness in the interview process, and the responses were captured in paragraph format, but we wanted to be able to do some analysis and of that information and try to understand and extract broad patterns. So we needed to categorize, or our approach was to categorize some of those questions, and then we could, once the information was categorized, we could then plot it and do statistics on it. So after identifying the narrative responses for categorization, we defined categories to summarize the responses, and then we did the categorization. And here's an example. So we had a question posed to actually all of the users, but in this case, it's the agriculture users. Question 20, what is your biggest concern about water in the Yampa Basin? And in this case, we had wide range of responses. An example response is shown there: water demands from the public and the eastern slope, the compact system. And that was sort of the summary of their response. And so what we did is went through and figured out, okay, well, this narrative is really describing concerns about losing agricultural water due to demands from the eastern slope, and then also losing water due to a compact call. So for this particular answer, it addresses 2 of 4 categories that we defined for this question. So once we've done that with all of the many questions, as well as just cleaned up the numerical results, we then developed a series of interactive visualizations. And we did this using a software platform called Tableau, which we like a lot because it allows you to mock up very quite complicated visualizations very quickly using any sort of data that you have around. So this is an example of a visualization that we developed for purposes of sorting through and making sense of the data. So this is that same question 20, and what you see on the right-hand side in the map is the locations of the respondents from the various sections of the river, so the upper, middle, lower Yampa, and then the Elk River. So those are indicated by colors, and then you're able to, with this visualization, identify, well, which of these respondents had issues with one of these 4 categories, and that's summarized down below in the bar graphs. So for example, if in the interactive graphic, you can say, well, let's show me the results that had concerns about loss of agricultural water or shortages, and you can see that which responses are included there. And then in the version that's online, you can put your mouse over it and see more detail about the responses. And so we generated many of these visualizations to help us get our hands around what the results were telling us and develop a narrative for dissemination. And then lastly, we took that information and we developed a web portal. We did this using Google Sheets, which is free and easily done and did not require hiring a web developer to do that. I'm going to show it to you in a second. But inside this web portal, we have individual, essentially web pages, and we're able to embed those visualizations, those interactive visualizations within the web page for seamless interaction. And that's also something that Tableau offers to the public for free. So it's something you don't need to, we didn't need to put a lot of budget towards. So this information is now available on the Yampa IWMP website. I'm going to click on it, click on this picture here, which takes me to the website. And I'm jumping straight to the section that is the stakeholder surveys and interviews section. And this is where we present our results. So definitely encourage you to take a look at this when you get a chance. It starts off with an introduction and instructions on how to navigate, and it essentially breaks out the results into a bunch of categories here indicated by different boxes. So it starts off with demographics and provides information about the agricultural, the M&I, and the ENR stakeholders. And then you can very quickly see how this is all working together. So we have some text and we might have some static figures, but then we have these embedded interactive visualizations. Some of these are quite simple, like this one, which just shows you how many agricultural stakeholder respondents we have and where they are. So this shows that we have 12 respondents in the Elk River area and 25 in the Upper Yampa, and you can mouse over and see a little bit more information. Some of the visualizations have a lot more information, as you'll see. And then you go on, in some cases, we've summarized information in non-map format. So this is talking about the type of irrigation and measuring devices and infrastructure that the agricultural stakeholders have. And so the story continues. You'll see, as we go through, you'll see these additional embedded graphics. I want to show you just an example of some of the more interesting ones. So if we look at under the support agriculture category, here it talks about the main concerns of the agriculture users. And so here's some statistics on what how many respondents are concerned about those different issues that I mentioned before, and then what river they're from. And then you can mouse over and you can actually see the individual responses. So you can understand how we went from the text response into categorizing it by one of these responses. And then we have these graphics where you can then do some more exploration. In this example, for instance, or in this graphic, for instance, you can actually, let me show you this one, since this is related to agriculture. So this talks about different restoration suggestions by the different respondents. So this is these are the respondents that said we need to expand or improve irrigated acreage. And so you can see that these are only done by only provided by agricultural respondents. Whereas if we go into fish habitat, you can see that other respondents indicated that there are needs for additional fish habitat. And again, you can mouse over here and see a lot of detail about the response. One more example, going over to the environmental and recreation water needs. Let's see, we can see their stakeholder concerns, and then this is, let's see, we already looked, let's see. This is what I want to show. So this looks at some of the observations about fisheries impacts by the agricultural respondents. And so here we can see all the different responses and then say, well, let's find out where people are concerned about bass or carp or, panfish. And then again, you can mouse over it and see additional information. So with that, I think I'll wrap up. Again, there's the full narrative is plays itself out over this 6 or 7 pages here, and it can all be viewed on this website here. So with that, I'll click back over to the slides and turn it back over to Nicole.
Thanks, David. So hopefully you guys can see that it's a really useful way to get your arms around some information that might otherwise be really difficult to try to convey to people. And in terms of how we've used and relayed this information, we are still in the process of kind of rolling it out to the general public. We gave our advisory committee, we have about a 25-person advisory committee, a guided tour of the findings. We've created kind of a short summary of the information that's being developed right now, and we're going to be doing some neighborhood meetings with the people that we interviewed to go back to them and hear, so that they can hear what we found later this year. And then in terms of using this information, we spent a lot of time thinking about the findings and what they meant in terms of actions and strategies for the basin. And we've currently landed on about 11 different potential focus areas based upon the findings that David showed you. We're doing a lot of small group conversations and polling within our committee to try to prioritize and refine those focus areas. We're going to be using the neighborhood meetings to vet those and refine them further. And then hopefully by the middle of this year, we'll have finalized those focus areas, and we'll be working on any additional data collection and turning all of these into strategies for project recommendations, actions, and sort of big picture basin multi-impact projects. And so with that, I think we will wrap up, and we are available to answer any questions that you guys might have.